Okay, continuing with Chapter 4. This is the fourth screencast, and we're continuing with the topic of human causes for extinction. We covered habitat destruction and started talking about overharvesting. So the example that I was going to give you was from 10,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age. There were large animals such as mammoths that survived the ice age, but then they were hunted by humans, and so that may have been, was most likely the cause of their extinction. Third cause is introduction of invasive species. An invasive species is a species that was not historically found in a particular habitat, but it has moved in or been carried there, and as a result, it doesn't have many predators, so it can usually outcompete other species in the area and therefore take over the area. And we'll talk about some interesting cases of that later on. And the last one is climate change. So an example that we're already seeing for climate change would be in polar regions, where some species like the polar bear are now endangered because of the melting ice, and that changes their habitat and their ability to hunt for seals, etc. So again, we'll talk about this later, but that is a may be leading to a sixth mass extinction. Okay, so now we're going to look at how evolution changes ecological niches and determines how species are distributed. So first, a couple of terms. First of all, a realized niche is the range of abiotic and biotic conditions under which a species lives. It determines the species distribution or areas of the world where it actually lives. So those are the factors that we've already talked about. Within that, there are organisms or species can be divided into two general groups. The first one is a niche generalist, a species that can live under a wide range of conditions, and the other one is a niche specialist, species that live only in specific habitats. So let's think of some things like roaches. Would you put a roach in the niche generalist or a niche specialist category? Well, they can live anywhere under extreme temperature, extreme dryness, wetness, it doesn't matter. It can live anywhere, so it's therefore a niche generalist. And think of the giant panda in China that only eats bamboo. So in that case, it's the presence of a food source which makes it a specialist. So that's why it can only live in a specific habitat, not because of the temperature or humidity, but because of its food choice. And in fact, zookeepers, etc., have tried to train giant pandas to eat something other than bamboo so that they can survive in other places because the bamboo forests are disappearing, but that hasn't been successful. So consider the human species and consider whether we are niche generalist or niche specialist. We are generalist. We live in wide ranges of conditions, from hot areas to cold areas, and we eat a wide variety of foods and can survive on a wide variety of foods, much more than we actually eat. So we would be considered a niche generalist. So which category would contain species that are more likely to survive an environmental change? That would be the niche generalist. Okay, now we are looking at the levels of complexity at which nature exists. So the scales, if you will. At the not lowest, but the most specific group here is the individual. And here it's shown as a rabbit. Let me pause that a second. So at the first level, we have the individual represented here as a rabbit. The next level up is very important in ecology and environmental science, and that's a population. The definition of a population is that it is a group of all the same species living in a particular area. And we need to monitor populations' size and characteristics so that we know whether that population is experiencing threats or thriving well, etc. The next level up from population is a community, and communities consist of various different species, all of which are interacting. They may be interacting as nesting sites or food sources or any matter or energy interaction. So individual, population, community, and then moving up on a higher scale there is an ecosystem. And an ecosystem is consists of not just the matter interacting, but the energy flow through it, so sunlight, moving water, and things like that. And then at the top level, we have the biosphere, which is the entire Earth. And the biosphere is the living part of the entire Earth, including water, air, and land. And there are global processes that occur. So some of them we've mentioned, things such as the wind or air in one area eventually becomes the air in another part of the world. So that also is important. And it's good to reflect too on just how complex a biosphere is. There have been two projects, Biosphere 1 and Biosphere 2, where individuals got together, built a structure where they tried to have everything take place, all of the matter and energy exchange to take place within this domed place. So they had to bring in plants for growing, etc., and try to do this sustainably. So almost like if you were building a station on another planet, only here on Earth. And while interesting and a lot is learned about maintaining systems, both times it failed and they did have to end the project. Okay, let's see now. Okay, so on the next slide, we are going to look a little more carefully at populations. So that group of organisms that are all the same species living in a particular area. There's a field of study known as population ecology, and in this field of study, they look at all the factors that regulate a population's abundance, how many individuals are in that population, and distribution, so how the variety of those species, of that population, the individuals that make up that population are distributed. So first we have population size and density. So you will have populations, there will be populations of various sizes, some very densely living together very closely, and there are factors that may affect those individuals. So first there's density-dependent factors. When you have nutrients, water, soil, food, nesting sites, and so forth, and those factors are limited in abundance, that will affect how many individuals in a population or how dense a population can be in that particular place. There are other factors where it doesn't matter how many individuals were of a particular species were in that place, and those are density independent factors. And those are factors that can limit a population whether it's densely populated or not. So for example, if a hurricane comes through and destroys a mangrove forest, okay, it doesn't matter whether there were many of those particular trees or few, a hurricane coming through a particular area will still have the same effect. Actually, perhaps that wasn't the best use of an example because mangroves do absorb a lot of storm. So let's use California wildfires. If the fires come through, they are going to destroy that area Let me give this example of a density independent factor that wouldn't depend on the density of that population. So you could have a tornado light down in the middle of a whole grove of trees, or you could have a tornado hit the ground of someone's home where they just had a single tree, say, out in the front yard. So the individual tree's chance of surviving that event is not related to the density at which it existed in that population. So it doesn't matter whether it was a dense population or a lone tree. Either way, its chance of being destroyed by the tornado would be the same. Okay, a second factor that ecologists look at is population distribution. Populations of particular species tend to distribute in particular ways. So the first one shown here at the top is a random distribution. This is a New England forest, and you can see they're represented by the dots here. And so what type of tree is planted here or here or here, not planted here, exists here or here in this forest is random. This picture here is an example of a uniform distribution. And these are some territorial nesting birds that maintain this social distancing, if you will. These are called gannets, and they separate themselves off specifically like this. And then a third possible form of distribution is clumped distribution. These are some meerkats. They're really cute. They're sitting up here keeping an eye out for predators, and they do that in clumps, usually in groups like that, for better survival of the whole group. Okay, another factor in population ecology is population sex ratio. And so population sex ratio means the ratio of males to females. And in the case of alligators, at cooler temperatures, the eggs all become female. So if they're incubated at 86 degrees Fahrenheit, then the entire nest will be, all of the eggs will hatch as females. If that particular nest is warmer, incubated at warmer temperatures, such as 93 degrees, then all of the eggs will hatch as males. And so if climate changed, that would be an issue. But hopefully in most ecosystems, you might have nest under a shady tree versus a nest just out in the open in the sun. And then when those alligators mate, they could have access to other alligators to keep the sex ratio even. Okay, last but not least, population age structures. That's something we'll talk about next week when we talk about the human population size. So I'll get into it then, but basically whether most of the population consists of younger people, middle-aged people, older people, children, that has a large effect on the population itself. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to pause the screencast here, and then we'll move on to the next topic on the next screencast.